Today, you're joining us in one of the world's most wonderful places for sailing. Host to a long and illustrious history, the city of La Rochelle, with its seaport in the Bay of Biscay, is one of France's best-known maritime centers. It's here, that this port facing the Atlantic Ocean, that the Student Yacht World Cup will take place, in the deep blue waters of the Atlantic. In the early days of this event, created in 1979, only a few European countries participated. But it wasn't long before teams from Canada, the US, or Australia joined in, making this a real World Cup. So it's not hard to imagine how exciting the participants to the Student Yacht World Cup are on this, their first day in La Rochelle. These young yachtsmen can't wait to get started on the practice race scheduled for today. But they do not take this race lightly, for it's the perfect setting in which to take time to attend these little details that may affect their performance when the World Cup starts in earnest tomorrow. But first, let's meet some of the top teams competing here this year. The Irish team that finished third last year is now seeking victory. Although the team this year comes from a different university, its skipper is the same as last year and wants to get that bitter taste of third place out of his mouth. In championships like this, it doesn't take only knowledge to win. Experience is pretty crucial as well. Its duration makes it hard enough, and it needs nerves of steel to have a solid performance throughout this week. The Irish, though, look determined enough, and it's worth keeping an eye on them. On the other hand, we have the Italian team from the University of Brescia. Many of them are experienced sailors sailing in the Olympic classes and are feeling ready to use their knowledge in order to achieve a good result. Although they didn't have time to train a lot before coming here, they feel confident that they can achieve great things. And let's not forget last year's winners of the Cup. The French University of Euromed is present to defend its title and keep it in French grounds. Last but not least, the Canadian team that didn't come all the way here to La Rochelle for nothing. Many boys from this team have competed in European and World Championships this year in other classes, and they know how to win regattas like this one. So many things are left to be seen in the following days that the 32nd edition of the Student Yachting World Cup will unfold. But let's hear what some of these sailors have to say about today.
As you can see, lots of breeze. Unfortunately, too much breeze.
It's too windy to sail, so we're just making sure the boats are all prepared before we start racing tomorrow.
So you can see the weather is quite windy, and the jury decided that there will be no sailing today.
We would like to have a training day, and also, you know, we like the breeze, so it would have been nice to go out there and catch some nice waves and you know, just get the feel of the boat and everything.
So couldn't go out today. Really wish we could, so we get our first time out on the boat. Kind of figure out what we like, what we don't like, what we want to change about it. But other than that, really looking forward to getting out tomorrow.
I mean, we'll have the chance to do that tomorrow, so yeah, you can't really do anything about the weather or the race committee's decision, so.
It looks like the tradition of the practice race won't be kept this year. The students will have to limit the day's excitements to the wonderful opening ceremony the organizers prepared in La Rochelle this afternoon. The atmosphere here in France is amazing, and people are already making friends. The 14 student teams participating this year can't wait for the World Cup truly starting tomorrow, with 2 windward-leeward races. In France's famed seaport of La Rochelle, the Student Yacht World Cup is about to begin. with scores of excited sailors starting their day preparing their boats ahead of today's races. There are many details to be attended to before they are ready to start. Nobody wants to have to deal with any damages just as the competition now begins. The first start to a race is given around noon. Team USA was the first boat on the pin end, with teams from Ireland, Italy, and Switzerland on windward. Between these four boats, many close battles were being fought from early on. The advantage is always with the boat that achieves the highest speed and best angles. So, it was the Italian team that started to put some distance between themselves and their US rivals. But then the Italians decided to tack and bear away behind the Swiss team. Their passing was really close, an excellent handling of the boat from the Italians. The Swiss stuck with the left side of the course, managing to round the weather mark, less than a boat length behind the French team, current holders of the world title. An excellent rounding from them, with a very swift hoisting of the spinnaker. The other student teams were lined up behind the front runners. Their spinnakers being hoisted one after the other, now fashioned a stunning rainbow across the Gulf of La Rochelle. By the time the fleet reached the downwind mark, the Swiss had lost some precious meters from those separating them from their competitors. So now the Irish and the Canadian teams were getting dangerously close. And finally, it was these teams from Ireland and Canada that succeeded in finishing today in second and third place respectively. And those defending their title could of course claim to have started out well this year too. The second start was given before long, with the fleet immediately spreading across the starting line. The Australians decided to tack immediately this time, passing behind the poles before heading to the right side of the racecourse. However, the Finns were keeping a close eye on them. The team soon reached the weather mark and proceeded with preparing their spinnakers. The Canadians put in an excellent performance this time and won the race. The team from Ireland was following right behind them, leaving the Swedes in third place. The race committee quickly decided on a third race. This time it was going to be an inshore race, running for 16 miles. First, downwind towards Fort Boyard, up to the northwest Aix mark, and then upwind to SYWoC Point. But then the race was shortened. Now, boats would finish right in front of the port of La Rochelle. And once again, it was the Canadians who completed the inshore race ahead of the rest. A great day for Canada. But it's still too early for any conclusions to be drawn. There are many exciting days of competition ahead. Just before the second day starts, let's hear one of the competitors explain to us the race format for today.
Today we did two windward leeward courses, bananas as they call them here. So just a quick windward leg, 1.5 miles, and downwind, and then 2 laps and a quick reach to the finish.
The first start of the day was given early, and Team USA was once more the first boat on leeward. Ireland, on the other hand, decided to tack very soon and headed to the right side of the course. In the end, it was the Italian team that managed to round the downwind mark first. But most teams' boats were very close to one another today, and much excitement comes from situations like this. Before too long, the sailors were completing the second downwind, riding the waves, enjoying themselves, and aiming to extract good performances from their boats. The Italians managed to keep their lead and rounded the last mark before heading to the finish line. They were followed by the British, who were unfortunately having problems with their jib, and this gave the chance to the Irish to slip into second place. The second race then started without any delay. This time, the Italians and the Poles started on windward and were soon tacking to head to the right side of the racecourse. The Canadians joined them also, trying their luck with the right side after a relatively bad start in this race. They were rewarded for this choice. They rounded on top at the weather mark, followed by the Swiss team that had picked up the left side at the upwind. The Canadians did keep their lead, however, and they were ahead of the Irish team that had by now managed to overtake their rivals from Switzerland. Part of the thrill of these races owes to the fact that these boats are so similar and so cannot significantly outperform one another. Often the distance between them is just too small, and naturally, positions change frequently during the race, making things all the more exciting. The end results are rarely certain before the very final phase of the race. After completing a quick downwind, the Canadians dropped their spinnaker and were heading for another bullet in this championship. The Irish managed to stay in second place, keeping the small overall point difference from their Canadian rivals. A coastal race was sailed right after the two windward-leeward ones. This time, the boats had to sail upwind first and then downwind towards the Bridge of Ré, connecting La Rochelle with the island of Ré. As the boats were passing not once but twice under this beautiful bridge before heading back towards the port of La Rochelle and the finish line, the spectacle is astounding. When it comes to the overall results, the Canadians, however, remain in the lead. But the Irish are close and getting closer. Still, they're both far ahead from last year's champions, France, who at this point are in third place. Tomorrow, the forecast mentions light winds, but we're still a long way before the end of this exciting World Cup here in La Rochelle. On the first race of the fourth day, it was the Italians who rounded first on the weather mark, followed by the British. The combination of a really calm sea and medium breeze helped boats reach high speeds. The French team was trying to stay in front of the Irish, who are now really trying for a better result than their less than brilliant start to the race. They kept to the right side of the course, aiming for a better breeze, whereas the French decided to stay closer to the rest of the fleet. As for the Italians, they kept their position and rounded the bottom mark first, beating the British. A packed rounding followed these two teams, with the French managing to stay in third place. Soon, most of the fleet tacked, heading to the left side of the course, as this seemed the more favorable side at this point in the race. Yet it was Team Italy that was controlling the race up to now. But the Irish managed the big surprise. They were successful in gaining several places and were now third, behind the Swedish team. What a great performance from them today! The second race started with a partial recall because the Swedish and the Irish teams jumped the gun and were over the line. The Swiss, however, had a great start on windward, and they soon tacked, then headed right, followed by the Canadians. The Italians preferred the left side this time, but it turned out not to be the best of decisions. In fact, it cost them many places in the race. So the Irish were the first to round the mark. The jibe set they executed showed very well it was the right side benefiting them all during the upwind. In the second rounding, the fleet was quite packed as it reached the weather mark. But after hoisting their spinnakers, they all headed downwind and towards the sunny Gulf of La Rochelle, where the sailing experience was very much improved. When the Irish finally rounded the bottom mark, the distance separating them from the rest of the fleet was indeed considerable. Team USA were able to claim second place, and Canada came in third, just a few meters ahead of the team from Switzerland. Following a third windward-leeward race, it was finally time for the fleet to get some rest. After about an hour, they had to be ready for the start of the night race. And this was also going to be the longest race of the Student Yachting World Championship at 28 nautical miles. In these light winds, however, it would take the crews more than 5 hours before they would be able to race the entire course designated by the organizers here in La Rochelle. It's been a long, tiring day for the students here in France. After a good night's rest, they'll return for the 5th day of one very exciting yachting championship so far unfolding in La Rochelle. A beautiful day for sailing awaited the sailors on the next morning. With the boats evenly spread along the line, the first start of the day was given around 11 o'clock. Admittedly, an excellent start for most of the teams competing here in France. The French defenders of the world title were on leeward, along with the Swiss, as well as another French team. The Irish, on the other hand, were on windward, then tacked in the middle of the upwind, below the defenders. It was the start of a great performance from them. Both teams had now built an early lead from the rest of the fleet, yet remained really close to each other as they were reaching the weather mark. Then, in the short reach that followed, they had the time to prepare their spinnaker poles and the hoist. Team USA was in 3rd place, but still less than a boat length ahead of the second French team, and thus too close for comfort. Now, with the spinnakers hoisted, the fleet proceeded to sail downwind, helped by a breeze of 10 knots. The Irish were still attempting to extend their lead from the French. Last year's champions, however, did not intend to surrender precious meters without a fight. At the same time, the team from the United States was gradually closing the gap between them and the French. When the Irish finally rounded the bottom mark, they were still just a boat length ahead of the French. Then the two teams sailed on port while trying to keep clear from the rest of the fleet that was still sailing downwind. As soon as they cleared, both boats tacked and headed to the left side of the course. Team USA, however, decided to keep on the right side of the race course, and they were soon reaping the benefits of this decision. Finding themselves in first place, the US sailors were not about to let the top spot slip away from them. But the Irish were prepared to fight for a return to the first place. The Italians were doing great on the other hand, since they managed to steal the 3rd place from the French team. Last year's champions were now in 4th place. The Irish and American teams were battling it out, the Irish boat keeping on the right side of the course this time and trying to extract similar rewards as the Americans did in the upwind. In the end, the position of the US sailors was not threatened. In fact, they rounded the mark relatively undisturbed and then headed for that bullet. The Irish were rewarded with a consistent performance with a 2nd place, something that helped them extend their lead from the Canadians in the overall results. The second and last race for today was to be a coastal race, where the boats would be sailing upwind, moving past Fort Boyard in the process. This stunning, nearly 200-year-old fort, which was later used as a military prison, is a very unique structure, stranded in the middle of the sea. After this long upwind, the fleet hoisted their spinnakers and headed to North Lodge before again sailing back to La Rochelle for the finish. This time, victory belonged to the British team. Following a 4th place in this race, the Irish managed to retain their overall lead and now enjoyed a safe lead from the Canadians, still in 2nd place. But all these were soon left aside, and now the main priority was to have fun at the party that followed later that day. Now these young yachtsmen were really enjoying themselves. Such a friendly atmosphere and having some good fun is always important. But the next morning, things were a bit different than the previous days.
We're here in La Rochelle on the 4th day of racing, but we're all sitting on the shore because it's 27 to 30 knots of wind at the minute, which the race committee have decided sensibly is too much for us to race in. The Worlds here is it's a very interesting event because it's unusual to sail against lots of other students, so the vibe is maybe a bit more relaxed than some events, but it's still a World Championship and everyone's here trying to win, trying to sail as well as they can, but it's maybe more friendly than other World Championships you could do.
Let's recap on the state of the race on this 6th day of the championship unfolding in La Rochelle. The Canadians were the ones that started out the best and were continuing with some fast races until now. The Irish, however, were showing more consistency in their performances, finishing more often in the top spots. And so at this point, they deserved their place at the top of the leaderboard. The Italian team also managed some remarkable performances so far in this championship, though they did not start as strongly as the others. But soon enough, they were scoring bullets, eventually reaching 3rd place. In the process, they knocked off the French team, the previous world champions, from 3rd place. As for the Canadians, they were now eager for another stab at getting ahead of the other teams and returned to their excellent showings during the first stages of this championship. It seems, however, they'll need to wait one more day before they can show us what they're made of. But the weather did not seem to be on their side this last day. Following a skipper's briefing held at 9 a.m., the race committee announced the end of this championship. Bad news for so many students excited about one more day riding the waves here in the deep blue waters of the Atlantic. In fact, the rain is worse than Thursday, and the wind strength was exceeding 30 knots.
Yeah, it's been some pretty rough weather the past couple days. Stuff that we'd obviously like to go sailing in. Be fun doing a lot of surfing on the waves, some big hiking upwind. But unfortunately, with the boats and kind of just the overall safety of the event, they unfortunately had to cancel racing for the past 2 days. It would have been nice for us to get a few more races in. We were hoping to go top 3, maybe past the Italians and defenders. But unfortunately, we're going to have to settle for a top 5 finish. Not bad for a World Championship, but we were hoping to do a little better.
It's been a great 7 days here in France, and the athletes gathered here certainly reflected on the beautiful moments they shared with each other as they went through the process of furling sails, removing stickers, and returning the equipment they used during the past few days. There have been many excellent teams competing this year, and so many boats were embroiled in fierce battles these past 5 days. Some of these athletes were also involved in Olympic categories, and this naturally raised the level of the competition too. But in the end, this championship belonged to Ireland. From beginning to end, the team's performance was solid, and the Irish managed to keep their pace at the top of the leaderboard. The Canadians also enjoyed some great performances, but they had to settle for 2nd place, with the Italians finishing the championship in 3rd. A beautifully organized championship like this one hosted in La Rochelle would not be complete without a memorable award ceremony. All the teams gathered in the City Hall, and in a really warm atmosphere, everyone cheered for the winners. Having done well this year means the winners were also recipients and now proud owners of an authentic Rochette watch. As for the trophy, this will now travel to Ireland until next year, when again students from all over the world will congregate in French shores for the next edition of the Student Yachting World Championship. Let's hear a few words from the Irish skipper and a new world champion.
So this is bringing an end to a really long week. We've had 6 days of waiting to get the cup. We've gone up and down and all over the place to get here. Very inexperienced team. It's our first championship together, so this is a big surprise for us.
Just before we go, let's have a look at some of the best highlights of this year's event. Hope to see you all next year for the 33rd edition of the Student Yachting World Championship. Thanks for watching.